Hello, welcome everyone. I think we are live. Welcome to Gain Power's, we're calling it a lunch and learn, the Great Resignation and Employee Happiness in the Progressive Movement. So welcome for those of you who are here seeing this live and for those of you who are watching this after the fact. Today's event is hosted by Gain Power, as you can tell. It's obviously no secret that to employers that as we're transitioning out of the pandemic and out from a more lockdown state, there's a shift in what employees are looking for, both in their current jobs and in their job searches, which is why I'm so excited about today's guest. I have personally been devouring the data that this firm has been putting out about HR in a post-pandemic era and what that will mean for the future of work. And we thought that you might also like a deep dive. So with that, I'm very excited to welcome Stefan Hankin, the president and founder of Lincoln Park Strategies and Trendency Research. Stefan has a deep background in market research, data analytics, and communication strategy, and public opinion polling and analysis for clients that range from America's Promise to the City of Los Angeles, to Raytheon, to the Southern Environmental Law Center, to my old organization where I met Stefan, the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center. Stefan began his research career at the National Association of Home Builders Research Center and honed his skills in qualitative and quantitative research at Peter D. Hart Research, Widmeyer Communications, and Brilliant Corners Research. During his career, he's been a part of polling teams that helped elect Barack Obama become the 44th president of the United States. Thank you. Was the pollster for Cory Booker's presidential campaign and has led research projects in more than 25 countries and all 50 states and 2 U.S. territories. So with that, we are, just so folks know, we are broadcasting on multiple platforms. But if you are here and you have questions, please tune in through Facebook and we'll do our best to answer your questions as we go. So with that, welcome, Stefan. Really glad to have you. Before we dive into the data, can you tell us a little bit about your firm, what Trendency Research is, and why it's different than traditional polling?
Sure, and thanks for the very kind intro, and great to be here. So Trendency is a online engagement and research platform, and what we do with Trendency is we create a panel of an audience. And this can be consumers, customers, members of an organization. In the case of the data that we're going to be talking about today, this is just a national panel, representative panel across the country. And what we do with the panel is, instead of just we're collecting data, at the beginning of February, and then we wait a month and then we check in with people, we're continuously checking in with the members of our panel. And each time they log in, they answer a short series of questions, 8 to 10 questions. And those questions change every time they log in. And so we're tracking how opinions and behavior are changing over time. So it's not just what's happening right now, but since we're engaging with these folks through time, we can go backwards and look at how people's opinions have changed, what seems to have caused those opinions to have changed, and get an understanding of also what is likely to be happening in the future. So we refer to it as multi-directional data. So this is what's happening now. Here's what happened in the past. This is what's likely to happen in the future. And we for the data that we're talking about today, the HR data or the Great Resignation data, going back to I'm trying to think of exactly when we started this, but let's just say, sometime around in the early fall of last year, where, we saw it happening with our organization. Clearly, the information was getting into the news about people quitting and what were we looking for. And, when we first started, but I guess post Delta, pre Omicron, or I might have my timeline slightly off with our different variants, but, when people were talking about going back to the office originally, that's when we started collecting this data and getting an understanding of not just what was happening, but what people wanted to be happening.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so you sort of decided to do this research because you were seeing this, you were hearing about it. Can you tell us a few of the top lines that you found through your research?
Sure. So, and I'll say a quick caveat before I get into numbers is that like most of this is about white collar workers, office workers, like that have actual flexibility built into their job or potential the theoretical flexibility. Whereas, if you're in the service industry, you are, you work at a manufacturing plant, you work at a warehouse, jobs like that, there just isn't a really an option for remote work. So, and we ask questions differently depending on what type of job you have. But a lot of what we're going to be focusing on today is that sort of that office worker, white collar worker, whatever exact label you want to put on there. So with that caveat, I think the big takeaway I would say is I would not want to be in HR right now because there is literally no way to make everyone happy. That the one true answer, I'll call it, is pure flexibility. And I know there are a lot of people that are hearing that and want to run through a wall or bang their head against the wall. But that is if your goal is to retain and attract talent, there really is no way of doing this other than just having complete flexibility in terms of time in the office, what those policies look like. And, I can't think of a time where the employees had this much power over what's going on, right? And this it is just going to require a complete shift in mindset for the leaders of organizations as we move forward. And I mean, could be wrong about this, right? But I just do not see how this genie goes back in the bottle. Now that we've people have tasted this for the last couple of years. Just the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I'm going to an office. Will it happen in places? Sure, but that's not going to be likely the norm for most people.
Yeah, I think that what my therapist would say is that for those in HR and those leading those organizations, you might have to sit in the discomfort.
So, yes, I mean, and for anyone listening who is big enough that has like an HR division or a person, I mean, like send them flowers, chocolates, case of beer, bottle of wine. They need it. This is not going to be pretty if your mindset is not in that flexibility mode.
Right. Yeah. So I'm wondering, so we've obviously heard the term the Great Resignation. Is that what's really like, is everybody resigning?
Yeah. Yes. No, I mean, obviously not everyone, or like,
right.
no one would have employees. But so as of March 12th, when I just looked at the data last night, 20% of people nationwide, again, of workers, I should say, are actively looking for a job. That's current, right? So this isn't factoring in what has happened in the past. 14% are passively looking. So you have about a third of workers currently looking at some level, and more than half are actively looking to get the hell out. And that number has been fluctuating, but we've been hovering around that somewhere in the low 30s of people looking, going back to about November, October, November. So it's a churn, right? So like people are obviously finding new jobs, but then more people are kind of backfilling that. So as you're looking around your organization, this is going to be different based on the organization, obviously, but nationwide, on average, about a third of your employees right now are looking to get out. It's a big number. It's a really big number.
That is a big number. I mean, it's even a big number, right, in sort of the progressive movement world where people do tend to move around a little bit more so that while there's an expectation. I mean, I know we're just seeing this on the hiring side of things. People are they're finding it more difficult to hire right now.
Yeah. And yeah, 100%. And I think, from purely for the progressive organization audience, right? Like we've we like to talk a very big game. We fight for workers' rights. We believe in equitable solutions. We higher salaries. Higher minimum wage. All the check boxes, right? But I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves, the organizations, not carte blanche, but a lot of organizations within the space don't live up to those values, right? So, and then many organizations have lived off the benefit of being in a city and an industry where there was a high demand for those jobs. And then therefore it was easy to find people to take low salaries, churn through the junior staff, burn them out, and then just backfill with new staff because there was just people there, right? And like movies, radio, TV, all have a similar. If you're in an industry where people really want to work, there was the ability to pay low salaries and just churn and burn, right? Like it is. We are kidding ourselves if we say that did not exist in the progressive movement. I mean, I'll raise my hand. I worked at a couple of those firms. It's miserable, but it was so sort of like, oh, this is how you cut your teeth, right? But now, in a very quick set of time, like even the 20-somethings out there are like, yeah, no, like not going to do that. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll talk about it, but like the nice white staffers. Right? Is that
dear white staffers? Yeah.
Yeah, dear white staffers. Sorry, nice white parents, dear white staffers. Right. So like we're seeing it now, right? And like not only opening the curtain of the toxicity, but just also sort of like how we have treated the employees at these organizations. So what we're seeing now in the progressive organization and what we see in the data, and we didn't clearly just ask this of people who want to work in politics or progressive things, but taking this data, looking at what's happening, the two things are clearly there's a similar picture going on of like there's a much more discerning set of workers who are like, no, I'm just not going to do this anymore. And if you're not offering something that I want to do with a salary that's decent enough in an environment that I want to be in, I will go find it somewhere else.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about salary. Does everybody just need to start paying more? Is that going to make everyone happy, or what's?
So yes and no, right? Yes, you should pay people more, right? And again, like I think progressive organizations and leaders of progressive organizations, especially on the consulting side of things, right? We have done many surveys about like the importance of minimum wage, and not to say that like we pay people less than minimum wage, but like certainly there are a lot of organizations set up to make as much money as humanly possible for the founders of those organizations, right? And now like from the purest definition, like that is the job, that is what a company does, right? Like tries to maximize profits, right? But I think now owners and are going to just have to come to grips with the fact of like, look, that end of the year dollar amount that you really enjoy might be lower, and you're going to have to come to grips with that if you want to be able to attract the talent. But all that being said, it's not just salary anymore. I mean, yeah, again, should you be paying people more? Absolutely. But in our data, we're seeing when we ask people like what actually makes a good job, like how much, what goes to what, right? And the way we ask questions most of the time is people can allocate their answer, right? So it's not just what's most important: salary, benefits, the remote policy, the job, and pick one, the binary view. We say, okay, here are the things that go into a job. How much weight are you putting on each of these things? And so what we found was like salary is important, like there's no question about that, but it was only 24% an average allocation. And then benefits were 18%, the time off that you get 16%, the remote policy 13%, and the job itself, which is a little bit of a catch-all, but is 21%. So it's almost as equal to salary, right? Now, so salary is important, but it doesn't run, like it doesn't rule. So it's not just like, okay, I pay everyone more, everything's going to be fine. Right. And now to put HR people in a total tizzy. So the people who are actively looking for work, their average allocation to salary is 24%, and the job itself is 27%. So the people who are actively looking are actually putting more weight on the job than the salary. But the people who are passively looking, 53% is the average allocation for salary. So basically, if you don't pay enough, all your passive lookers are going to turn into active lookers. If all you do is just increase salary, you're not going to be attracting that 20% who are looking for a job, and that salary probably isn't really going to solve your people leaving problem. So it's really a yes, you need to pay people more because we just should be paying people more, but it's not going to. That's not the solution to all your problems.
Great. That was very
Yeah.
clear.
Yeah.
I feel, I feel ready to advise folks on what they should be doing. No, it is, I mean, obviously there's a lot of talk around, making a living wage. And I do think it's one of the things as, talking about Dear White staffers who have really, to your point, they have like, they've peeled back the curtain on that toxicity and the low wages and I'm, hopefully, I mean, obviously, maybe single-handedly are getting a congressional staffers union, and are opening, the door to others to talk about what their salaries are. But it, but it's also very clear the work environment is really important. Um, and so, I don't know if you guys have pulled any information about the type of environment people are looking for. Maybe this goes to the flexibility.
Yeah.
But do you have, any insights on like what is a good work environment?
I mean, obviously that's going to shift, right? And then there are also, with the understanding that like, look, there are just organizations where just paying people a ton of money is not an option, right? Because the budgets just aren't there. But so everyone's got to sort of mold this into their own thing. But I would certainly argue for the fact that look, just because we lived a certain lifestyle or we lived a certain experience when we had our entry level jobs, does that not mean that like, oh, everyone else has to cut their teeth in the same way, right? So it's like, oh, well, like when I was 25 and working in the consulting, my first job in the consulting world, like we worked 20 hours a day and I barely got any sleep and like lost significant others because like could never go out or it's like, yeah, like that's not healthy. And like, so just because you did it doesn't mean everyone else should do it, right? And I think for most organizations, like look around, right? Like how long have the junior staffers been around? Like how long have those middle people, not just like obviously the partners are around, right? But like, is everyone like just getting out of Dodge the second the election's over? Like you're probably not creating a great work environment, right? And again, it's like, look, if your bottom line is just like, we just need to make as much money as humanly possible for the partners, okay, like it's your organization. You get to run it however you want, but just understand like you're not going to attract the talent, right? And it's the same thing with like if you are definitively like, no, everyone has to be in the office 5 days a week, from 9 to 5 or 9 to 10 or whatever, 10 p.m. Whatever you're at, whatever your like quote unquote normal hours are, like that's fine. You get to do whatever you want, but just understand that like that's going to get factored in. And if you're not providing that connection with where people want, you're just not going to attract the talent. And you're not going to retain the talent because people are going to go to the places where they feel like they have the balance that they want. Now, getting back to the data, so right now, 52% of people say they're in the office too much. 14% say they're in their office the right amount, and 34 say they're in the office too little. So again, good luck figuring that one out. But it really is just like, it's just like, look, like you gotta come up with a policy that's going to work for the majority of people, and that's not be in the office 100% of the time, and it's not necessarily we're just remote. Now, if you're full remote, right? Like, so Trendency has gone, we are a remote company. Like that's how we're hiring people and that's how we present ourselves, right? So obviously, in the job description, that is up front. We are remote. Like, I mean, we have people in like California and Georgia and Virginia and DC, and like, we're all over the place. That is up front, right? So obviously, like if that's not what you want, you're not going to apply for this job. That's fine. Like we're not going to give you what you want. Like, but that's how we're presenting ourselves. And if we're in the office 5 days a week, I would put that right up front, or else you're going to be wasting a lot of time with folks who just don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about being very transparent on the front end of an interview process. In the job description, everything from, your starting salary range to the expectation of where and when folks are expected to work. Because hiring it's a long process as is, and to get somebody to the end to have a surprise, it is never helpful. So yeah, I think that's a great tip. Just be very transparent in your hiring. If your expectation is one thing and you tell them and they say, I cannot meet that, they aren't going to be able to meet that, 2 weeks into the job if you surprise them with that. And then you're going to see that kind of turnover. So I think that's very helpful. So I am wondering a little bit about, as people are designing their post-pandemic back to office, maybe back to office, back to whatever is going to happen when people decide to move back to something more regular. Do you have thoughts about how people should design those plans, or the input they should get in? I mean, I want to get a little bit into your data about parents versus, we have a lot of parents in the progressive movement too.
I know.
But I'm wondering what's the best way to engage employees even to kind of design those plans, and because people are looking for different things.
Right. And I think, and this goes to sort of part of the sort of the core of what Trendency is, right? So it's not, you want to be getting feedback and have that engagement with your employees, right? So you got to ask. And then also with the understanding of opinions change, right? So don't just ask once. Keep getting that understanding from your employees. So as you're developing the plans, have those check in, hey, this is what we're thinking. What do you think of this? How do you feel about this? And then once plans are implemented, you want to keep getting that feedback from your employees of is this working for you? Right? Because you want them to be thinking about it, providing that feedback so that you can adjust your plans as needed. But then B, you want to be getting an understanding before it's too late, right? If you set up, so even if everyone was hey, this is what I think I want, and then you implement the plan and then it's going horribly wrong, the sooner you can figure that out, the better. When the tip off isn't the fact that 70% of your staff just got up and left because they just didn't actually like the thing that they may or may not have been advocating for. So I think a lot of it is just look, we got to be having the conversation. Some of these could potentially be a little uncomfortable for organizations because it's not pushing them in the direction that they 100% want to be in. But I think just we got to come to grips with that fact, and that continue, that ongoing conversation is what's ultimately going to get you to the right place. And I don't think, what I think we're losing in the sort of the remote versus not remote debate, that especially on Twitter, which is obviously always the worst place to have discussions, but it doesn't have to be every organization should do what's best for them, right? There's not an answer other than, we're sort of look, I think flexibility is pretty much your only real answer here to get everyone happy. But look, you I know, have an acquaintance who has a small company of 12 people, and they all had a discussion and they all decided what they want to do is they all want to be in the office September through June, speaking of parents, because most of them are parents and stuff like that. And then they want the office closed and work remote for June, July, August, right? So it's sweet. That's what they decided. That's what works for them. Awesome, right? And now, in Trendency, we're fully remote. That's what works for us. Great. That might not work 100% for you. So it's not it's either this or that. It's literally just what is going to work for us. But then the understanding of those decisions are going to affect the types of people that you can attract, right? So you mentioned parents, right? And now parents have I don't know if unique is the right word, but certainly there are other little people in their house that they have to worry about, right? So it is things hey, kids get sick, kids have days off from school that are especially if you live in DC, that seems super random and don't line up with anything that seems to make logical sense to anyone else. Sorry, slide aside. But so it's look, I just need those days where it's I I need to be able to take my kid to the doctor. I need to be able to stay home and just work from home because my kid's like kind of sick, but not that sick, and sick enough that I'm not going to send them to home. Or it's like, obviously in the days of COVID, like, hey, my kid's got to quarantine for 5 days because they were close contact and whatever your rules are at your various schools. So, therefore, like, I just need to be able to work at home for 5 days. And pre-pandemic, that for a lot of organizations, I'd be like, no, you have to take the time off, and tough. So, and I think, so like what we definitely see with parents is, again, it's a total mixed bag, right? There is no one definitive answer for parents. And we see that moms and dads have a different viewpoint of what is important. And like, interestingly, moms are the most, I'll call it, distributed on how important salary is. So moms are more likely to say than dads that salary is a bigger slice of the pie of what's important for a job. They're also the more likely than dads to say it's like the least important thing. So moms have like gone this way. Dads have sort of like gone a little bit more into the middle, which I think probably goes against some like, gender stereotypes that are out there. And then but for parents, certainly the flexibility is viewed even more important than for non-parents. And not to say that non-parents are like, don't want flexibility, right? But it's, thinking back to previous times and before I had kids, right? I was like, well, why does the person with kids get to definitively leave at 5 o'clock to go pick them up, but I can't just walk out at 5? Like, right. That's a bunch of BS. And it kind of is, right? But so it is that, like, parents are looking for more flexibility, but it's not a definitive, like, parents want to be remote and people who don't have kids don't want to be remote. It's just a mix. And, and I think this is where organizations have to be careful that, you're not going to make everyone happy, right? So you are going to have to get an understanding of what does this mean in terms of how many people are going to leave based on the policy that we put in place.
Right. Yeah. And I think it also goes to, again, expectation setting within your organization about, what you value. And you sort of, you said, I always, you don't want to pit the people with kids, people without, because oftentimes people without kids also there could be elder care, pet care, neighbor care. There's all sorts of ways we care for people. Go back to this new care economy that we're talking about. And if we value the care economy and that we have to do that, I think it's important to set the expectation that whoever you're caring for, including yourself, to be flexible on that kind of care. But it also means being gentle with one another around, oh yeah, so-and-so's kid has to quarantine. And so you have to be home and they might pop up in the Zoom. And I think that's become more of the norm, but I think just sort of, setting the expectation. So it's not a question that somebody's asking, why does this person walk out the door at 5 o'clock every day? Maybe they're in the office at 7:30. There's all sorts of, we're getting our work done in different ways. And I think that's a little bit what we've found is like, oh, we can get our work done in different ways. There are ways to accomplish the work in different, different hours, different venues, different, the ways we do it. And I think there's a group of people like, I don't care how you get the work done, as long as you get the work done. And then there is, there's the stuff like we have to collaborate and being in the office is going to help for this. So I think it's also just being transparent and setting expectations with everybody around, what the game plan is, and knowing, to your point, some people aren't going to like it. And you can't, we can't make everybody happy. And that's, I think, what your data has shown is that there's no one way to make everybody happy. So everybody who's looking for, the magic bullet, the thing that's going to do it, there's not one thing. And I think that's an interesting, it will be an interesting challenge for people.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And I think the other thing that everyone has to keep in mind is the fact that we haven't hit full non-pandemic status yet, right? So we're still, at least in Washington, D.C., you walk around the streets, it's all like, oh, apparently, I guess we're just done with the pandemic. But we haven't fully hit the we can go most places and feel relatively comfortable and stuff like that, right? So, and then why I bring that up is the fact that people who are working remote have had the benefit of not having to commute, being more available for their kids if that's applicable. Like those like that side of the flexibility we've certainly experienced. Oh, I can pick up and visit my parents and work up there, and I don't this isn't like a big deal and stuff like that. All those things, right? Like what we haven't quite gotten to yet is the like, oh, like I can go hang out with like my friends during the day, and that's like our we work, right? And like now my coworkers are now people I genuinely like choose to be friends with, not like forced to be friends with because of an office. And like we've now set up a place where we all kind of like go together, or like every day we meet for lunch and or go for a walk as like a group or like things like that. And not to say those things aren't happening, right? But I think we haven't quite hit the full flexibility in the work with the like a normal-ish world. And when those two things come together, I'm hard pressed to imagine that the desire to go back to the office is going to go up. And then if anything, I'm going to guess that it's going to go down, because it's like there's a lot of stuff I can do with people I really like, and I get to be more choosy of who those people are, and
Right.
this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't even like we are not in that place yet. And it's going to continue to evolve. Yeah. So I'd encourage people to remain flexible. Things are going to change. I don't know what variant is coming next. Hopefully not whatever I'm knocking on. Oh God.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be kind of remaining flexible and just being open to continually listen, to your point, to your employees and what you're hearing from them about, what is making their day better. Especially I think in the world that we work in, it can be hugely high pressure. I mean, there's a lot of folks that we're getting into that place in the midterms where things are going to start to gear up. The summer's going to be crazy. So what are the things that make doing the work and the long hours? Being honest, we work long hours. I don't think you
Yep.
can sugarcoat that. And if it's not in your job description, you should probably put it in there. But what makes the long hours palatable? Are you compensating for the long hours?
Right.
But again, what makes is it more palatable? Because somebody's like, yeah, I had my friends over to my backyard for a picnic, or they can, in the middle of the day, whatever it is. And that's going to come down to trust.
Right. And yeah, no, 100%. And I think, look, there's also the bigger picture of like how we are, and this is very specifically progressive side of the campaign world, right? Of like how we treat the relationship between consultants and the campaign, right? It's very transactional, right? Like you do a poll, we pay you. You do a piece of mail, we pay you. You do an ad, we pay you, right? And then outside of the political world, like, and especially with Trendency, it's we are on a monthly retainer model or a subscription model, whatever you want to call that, right? It's a very different relationship, right? So it's not how much work / money can we jam into a period of time. It's like we have a relationship with you that is built over time, and we're not just jamming all this work, forcing all employees to work 20 hours a day for 3 months, making them completely miserable. And so it's a more, I would argue, professional relationship than just the one-off campaign relationship. Now, it's not going to totally ever change just because campaigns have a definitive end date, and you don't start talking to voters until a certain period of time and things like that, right? But I think there's a lot more we can do on the campaign side to professionalize the relationship. And also, I mean, I don't want to get too far on my soapbox here, right? But like also if you're moving away from the concentration of work on a few larger consulting firms, I think goes a long way in also creating a more equitable / better places to work, which then builds the bench and create and then holds talent in the progressive community, which I think arguably is better for everyone, right? Like if we just burn out as many people as humanly possible and they all just leave, like that's not really good for the movement. So I think there's a lot more we can be doing in the bigger picture to create this as a better space for people to come, learn, work, stay.
Right. Yes, I agree. And I definitely think that there are, a lot of organizations and firms, it's harder to speak for campaigns, but, who are working on figuring that piece out and figuring out that difficult balance of like, there is an end date and we're racing towards the end. We
Yeah.
are, and, when it's over, it's just over no matter what. And, you're hoping for the W, whether it's a ballot initiative or or a candidate campaign, or, issue advocacy even oftentimes can fall off after an election because you're advocating around a specific issue
Yeah.
related to the campaign. So yeah, making that kind of that long-term sustainability, but knowing it's going to get busy and it's going to get tight. There's going to be more demands on our time as we get closer. So I do think, and again, I'll go back to, I think what, Dear White Staffers has done to sort of open light to people who said, I left and I couldn't be happier that I left politics. It was too much. What we want to do is attract talent. So, living into our values, and sometimes that's hard, and it costs money. We're going to have to spend money on those things. But I think it's kind of like, I think it comes back to you.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. And I think this goes, as you've been saying, right, like the sort of the honest conversation at the beginning, right? So it's like, look, and I think most, and I'm thinking like direct mail firms have this like very specific problem of like, okay, they're primaries, and then like, then there's this like, 6-week sprint at the end, and everyone's life is miserable and stuff like that, right? I don't think you get around that. But like, how are you setting that up to the people you're hiring in the beginning, especially people who are new to the industry and don't really know, right? Like, and then this is where the flexibility comes in, where it's like, look, let's just be honest, your life is going to be miserable for 3 months, but we're going to make up for that because like over here, like we're not going to force you to sit at a desk for 9 hours doing nothing just because I'm paying you, and therefore I feel like you should have to be here. And and not to say that that's how mail firms run, but like, obviously giving an extreme example, but it is the like, look, if people are walking into a job eyes wide open, there's a much better chance of them sticking around and or not being just totally miserable because you sold them a bill of goods of the awesomeness of this job and then you hand them complete misery, right? So it's, I think I worked briefly on the Hill, right? But like I have yet to see a story that's like, oh, well, that's shocking, right? Because it's like everyone, like, we know this is going on. Like, we knew, like, everyone knows who the terrible offices are. We know, like, who gets mistreated. We know who the terrible bosses are and the members of Congress, right? And it's not just like, oh, Republicans treat their staff badly and Democrats treat them off, like, awesome. In fact, like, there are many Republican offices that had reputations and of great places to work, and some that were miserable. And there are plenty of Democrats who are terrible to work for. And the same thing on the consulting side, right? Like, what I typically say to people, I'm like, at least in DC, right? Like, reputations tend to be pretty spot on. So I've yet to come across an organization that has a terrible reputation that's actually a great place to work, or vice versa. That these places are typically, there's a reason why they have the reputation that they do.
Right. And I think the one nice thing about the working in the movement and having is that the staffers and the employees right now who are getting loud know how to get loud, right? They know how to elevate their voice. They know where to go. And so, continue to use it. And I just encourage employers to continue to listen,
Yeah. Well, if you thought like Glassdoor was bad for your business, like, welcome to our new world.
Yes. But I think, even if you haven't seen yourself get dragged, if you have, use as an opportunity to see what's happening out there and say, okay, just make note of things before it becomes personal. Because I think it's harder when it becomes personal to make those shifts. So I think some of these proactive shifts, the flexibility that you're finding, the asking employees, what does flexibility mean to you? So you can better understand that and cater to the extent that you can to what they're looking for, I think is, use this as a moment, right?
Right. No, 100%. And I think a lot of it is also like, as an organization, you have to decide like what are we and what do we want to be, right? And that's not just your goal, right? Like we're trying to end childhood hunger, or we're trying to create world peace, turn back environmental change, whatever. I'm just making sure I'm picking a bunch of different random
Oh,
but so it's like that's your obviously that's your organizational goal, right? But internally, like what do we want to be, right? Like do we want to be, look, if your answer is like, look, like I want to be a place that makes me a lot of money and I want to churn, and I'm going to do that by churning through like junior staffers, like okay, like your choice. But now just understand those choices have ramifications on the types of people you can end up hiring, right? So like it's just it all just gets factored in, and there is no right, quote unquote, right choice for everyone. It's like that is going to be a different thing for each organization, but coming to grips with what that is hugely important, right? And then like on the Trendency side, we decided, like as a group, and like we're smaller organizations, so a little easier to do these things, but like we've moved past just like posting salary on job descriptions, but we have full salary transparency internally, so everyone knows what everyone else is making. Everyone gets to see what everyone else's bonus is. It was like super weird in the beginning, but now it's like this is just what it is. And then anytime we're hiring someone, they don't get to see the salary with the name, but they get to see the list of salaries and the level that someone's at, and be like, look, this is what we pay people.
Yeah.
Tell us what you want, what you think you should be paid with this information in hand. Knowing full well that it's unlikely that you're going to get paid more than your boss, or B, right. Just like you have to walk into a room and everyone is going to know what you're going to get paid. So like you also need to have this information before you decide to take this job. Now that's an extreme, and it works for us. It's not going to work for everyone, right? But those kind of things, like figure it out, like what works for you, and then what are the potential ramifications of attraction and retainment.
Right. Yeah, I think that it does go to retention, and you can attract somebody, but how do you retain them? And that's interesting. That's some really real radical transparency there. Kudos to you for being, I think it's hard, to your point of like, it was kind of uncomfortable at the beginning. A lot of things that are changed are uncomfortable.
Right.
So making the decision to do it, making it together, and and I mean, as a leader, I think that you're putting out a lot of information. It's very vulnerable, right? You put yourself into a very vulnerable position. But in ideal world, not only does it attract talent, but it helps you to retain talent. And I think it's the one thing, organizations who do retain talent longer, they grow in ways that organizations who do churn and burn may be unable to. I mean, I'm even thinking about in the nonprofit space, right? Folks who get funded by foundations. Foundations ask the question about your staff turnover. That's a real thing they want to know, is like, what were your changes, around your staff? So being able to let them know, like, we keep a steady staff. That's, it's the spending money to make money in some ways, makes it happen.
And I'm sort of jumping backwards here, but the other thing that we saw in the data, like we did some regression analysis and cluster analysis, right? And we found that only, and this is nationwide, so this is going to vary hugely group by group, but only a third of workers nationwide fell into the everyday sunshine crowd, is what we call them. Like they're just happy in their job, right? And like that's a really small number, right? And I think that speaks a lot to probably more us as a society, of like the fact that only 1/3 of workers are like truly happy in their job. So like what can you do as an organization to get more people into that space? And then the second largest group, which was like just under 30%, were we call the Freedom 90. We have a music thing going on here, but like people who are like generally happy with their job but don't feel like they can be themselves. And and that's like a whole other problem of like, look, if people are in your organization but don't feel like they can be their true selves, like that's a whole other problem. So again, like having those conversations, figuring out where your coworkers, your employees, what have you, really are, is going to go a long way in solving a lot of these attraction and retention problems.
Yeah, that seems like its whole own. Not,
Whole
yeah,
other
that's like a
conversation.
whole other thing, who's the yeah, and now it makes me feel a little bit sad around how few people in the country, and extrapolate it out to the movement, feel, happy and content in their jobs. So, well, this is all excellent information. I'm wondering, in terms of like parting thoughts, you know, progressive movement employers, what's the one takeaway?
If I'm one word is just the flexibility, right? Like it's just organizations have to be flexible in their thinking. You have to treat employees with a flexible mindset of that there is no one right thing for each organization, and there is no one right thing for each employee, right? And then again, it's coming to that true understand, right? Like you really have to, you know, what do you call it, the discomfort chair, right? Like you have to sit in your discomfort chair for a little while and like really come to grips with like what do I want this? What is the actual goal of this organization from an internal perspective? And and then how do we meet that goal? And do I need to be more honest about that goal? Because like again, this is more about like the consulting side, right? Like if your goal is to have a really big boat and a nice summer home and the 3 other homes or something like that, like okay, just come to grips with that fact and then adjust your selling of these jobs accordingly, so to make people a little bit less miserable. But you just getting in touch with what that really is.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, I've taken up a lot of your time. I appreciate it so much. And everybody, this data, by the way, is all available on Lincoln Park Strategies website.
Trendency's website, but
Trendency's website. I'm
yes,
sorry. Trendency's website, which is
Trendency.com.
Trendency.com. So check it out. And you can subscribe and get the news on a regular basis. And I'm telling you, it is fascinating information. And they do research about all sorts of other stuff that they're putting out on a regular basis. And I know you just started doing videos too, which I've been watching religiously. No, they've been really great, and it's just really handy information to have. So go check them out. Obviously, if you're not already a Game Power member, please go gamepower.org. Check out. We have a great platform that allows you to network and talk to folks, form your own groups. It's free to join. There are upgraded memberships, but take a look. We'd love to have the more the better. The idea is that it is a community driven platform. So come on and join our community. And with that, thank you, Stefan. We'll close out our broadcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.